Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Breaking Down Security. This week, you're going to hear part 2 of our interview with Chris Sanders. I'm going to go ahead and get right into this because all the announcements and everything we have are going to be at the end of the show. First is a continuation of the question we were asking last week, where Ms. Berlin, we talked about Ms. Berlin having doing some work for some curriculum dealing with the ATT&CK Matrix. And if you're not aware, at the RSA conference this year, there was a lot of companies out there that were trying to map their controls against the ATT&CK Matrix framework. And we had talked to Chris before the interview, and he had mentioned that there are some companies out there that are scrapping all of their technology and all of their existing attack techniques and, starting over with the ATT&CK Matrix. So we asked why that was a good thing or a bad thing. So that's the question we lead off with. Have a great rest of your week.
So models are good and we need models. One of the kind of other signs, I guess, of cognitive crisis that we're dealing with is the fact that when new models emerge, we are so model hungry that we cling to them with everything we have. The ATT&CK framework is a fantastic model for categorizing and identifying various facets of an attack. So I see a lot of vendors now are creating blog posts where they map the different steps to the attack model, or they're creating detection rules and mapping those. That's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what ATT&CK is used for. And it's also useful for a way to figure out what to learn if you're new, right? If you're new to this field and want to learn what attacks do I need to learn how to defend or do if I'm in the pen testing side of things, well, that's, the ATT&CK model gives you a sense of what those are. It's not prioritized. There are people who are doing some of that work, but it gives you a sense of what you can look at. Those are all great uses. Now, where the problem comes in is when an organization comes in and says, wow, we have all these great detections and all this great work we've already done. We're just going to throw it all out and start from new, building from scratch with ATT&CK. We're only going to focus on things from ATT&CK, and that's it, right? So that, it's a useful model, but not when you throw everything out in favor of living or dying by that one model, which has its limitations. We have this notion of threat modeling, right? You have to understand what assets you have on your network, where your sensitive data is, what matters to your business, your organization, and build kind of your threat profile and work through that. Now, the ATT&CK model can be used in helping map some of those things, think of things you hadn't thought of before, organizing the data and the protections that you're building, but it is not meant to be all-encompassing. It's not meant to define the entirety of your security organization. But because we're so model hungry and we don't have enough of those models that help us fit together the pieces of this jigsaw puzzle, we rely very heavily on the pieces that we do have.
I feel like people maybe have if they're doing that for the ATT&CK framework, they've probably done that before where, prior to that, it was the kill chain that they're going, on. And prior to that,
Perfect
maybe it
example.
was PCI. And like every time a new whatever comes out, like, oh, well, this is now what the only thing anybody cares about, and all that stuff that we just did is just garbage.
Like the 20 critical controls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and the kill chain's a great example. When that paper came out, that's all you heard about that's all you hear about to some degree is the kill chain, this, the kill chain, that. And the kill chain was fine. It elaborated, here's a common attack life cycle, and here's the steps you use to kind of mitigate that or perform the kills on the different stages of the chain. Of course, then what a lot of people started to do was they took the attack life cycle that was in that paper and they said, yes, we're going to build everything around this one attack life cycle.
You can't.
And you can't, right? Because there are a lot of attack life cycles. And this is a good example of where we have complementary models, right? There's nothing wrong with having a dozen different common attack lifecycle models because there are probably that many common types of attacks. So another one that's popular, so Mandiant has the one they use that's related more closely to structured threat actors. And again, that's really good when applied to structured threat actors. It's not really good when applied to commodity malware or ransomware delivery or something like that. That's okay. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly important to know the limits or the bounds of the model. And because we don't have enough of them, we tend to over-apply the ones we have.
Yeah, I mean, even writing rules and any security tool or guidance around just the ATT&CK Matrix leaves you with so many gaps. And even if you apply all of them out that we listed, you still end up with gaps because they all cover different things.
And the MITRE folks have been really good about this. Most folks generally are. I would say MITRE's been good about this. They have their ATT&CK Con where they have all these talks about ATT&CK. And I believe even last year they had a talk about basically what ATT&CK can't do for you and its limitations. And they're super clear. They've got a lot of good people working on that. And they just do a really great job of this is what this is for. Here are its limitations. Please listen to us.
Yes.
And I think that's really all you can ask of them, right? Like you can't ask for them. Like they're not responsible for people who misuse their model, because that's just going to happen.
And I feel like people don't give enough credit. I mean, it's great that they're doing that, but people will say, how terrible PCI is for implementing security, right? Well, they don't have to come out and say, no, this isn't going to solve everything. They're just kind of giving you what they know will help in the, in the specific situation where, I mean, it's really nice that MITRE is going kind of above and beyond what the other ones have. But, every framework is like that. We can't just expect them all to, be the end all be all.
Well, and it goes back to another model, right? Defense in depth, right? We have all these different pieces working together, and we have these layers of defense and layers of controls. And that's the reason we know, like you said, that, PCI is just merely one piece of the puzzle. Just because you do PCI does not mean you are secure. Does it mean you are more secure? Probably. I think that's safe to say, but it is not the entire puzzle in its own.
Ms. Berlin, what you were telling us before the show that you guys have started using the MITRE ATT&CK Matrix. What was the reasoning behind that? And did you guys look at any other attack or any other frameworks for this kind of thing? And did you recognize any shortcomings before you started using this to prepare for it?
I only there's a lot of questions in one.
Sorry.
No, it's right. So I started using it because I knew how many shortcomings there were in the kill chain, right? I had mapped like some common threats to all the different sections of the kill chain, and you're like, oh well, this one you can ignore the first 3 steps, and just kind of going through all of that and trying to build different like attack paths. I think MITRE does a great job of letting you see a attack path from beginning to end, whether it's specific or not. Like most of what's in there is helpful. No, because what I'm using it for is we're creating specific alerting so we can tie it back to it, right? But that's not going to be everything our tool does, because not everything is in there anyways. I'm also taking stuff from other SIMs that I've implemented and other rules that I've helped customers create. Taking things like, if I see like a really cool blog post out there of this cool red team technique, that was performed, I'm like just thinking, okay, well, I'm going to save that for later and like go back and, half the time, none of that, it's not covered in any of the frameworks. You need to kind of come at it from all angles when you're looking to do any type of alerting, I think.
I think a useful thing, kind of building on what Amanda said, is the cool thing about ATT&CK is I think ATT&CK will be useful in helping us build other models. Because if you look at attacks, they have discrete categories of things. And the beautiful thing about categories is once we have categories, we can develop subcategories or notice trends or themes. So, we have something based on, registry-based persistence. That's a category that exists in MITRE ATT&CK. So now let's take all these different attacks that we can classify using these discrete parameters they've identified. And now we have a data set we can go and look at. And, within that, are there subcategories that are emerged? Are there trends? How do people normally get there? Where does that exist in a normal attack? Is it later on? Is it right after initial compromise? Is it normally perpetrated this way by skilled actors versus this way by unskilled actors? There's a lot of things that can come out of that for the production of more models. So think of it kind of as like a meta model or something, if you will. But when you categorize things, the beauty of that is if you do it right, it allows for subcategorization and the noticing of trends and such.
Yeah, and I kind of want to contact MITRE, just or anybody that's working on it. I know it's I could as well. I have other things I have to do. So it would be nice because they have like APT this, use this tactic or whatever, but they don't have. A lot of the times they don't have. All right, well, these are like the top 5 tools that are involved with that, right? Like I as somebody that doesn't do red teaming and doesn't really know what tool I'm supposed to use for something, that would be super helpful, I think. I don't know where I was going with that. It's just an idea.
But then you're getting into marketing, right?
Yeah. It's kind of a hard line to figure out where to stop.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, they have to either they want to be impartial or they don't. They'd be like, oh well, if you're gonna, bypass user access
why
control.
Isn't my tool on there?
Right. If you're going to bypass user access control, well, now you need to use a CASB to understand what all the users are doing on the environment or something. And here's the best CASB to use, or here's the ones we suggest. And it's like, well, okay, mine's not on there. How much do we have to pay to, Gartner it up real
you
sweetly?
Don't want it to be a shittier Gartner.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Berlin. Gartner will never be a sponsor of the Brakesec podcast at this point. We were talking a little bit about that before the show. We were like, how some of these things in the Matrix are fairly specific and some are very generic, inhibit system recovery, for instance, under impact. And it seems like some of these things should maybe not necessarily be in there, like the impacts versus doing privilege escalation. Those are actions versus what would happen from having privilege escalation. You'd want the impact of, AppCert DLLs or being able to do application shimming. What's the impact of that? And that would be, some of these things are actions versus effects. And I'm not sure why they're in the matrix as it is. So, it would not be my first choice of model. Maybe that would be something, I'd want to talk to MITRE about. If they want to come on the show and talk about it, I'd be okay with that. But do people embrace these kinds of matrices and frameworks because it's easy and they just kind of build on that, or, they just don't know where to start themselves?
All of the above, right? Like it's a lot of it is it's an answer to a question, right? The question oftentimes is, I have to detect all the things. How do I know what all the things are? Well, here's a list of all the categories of things, right? That's the key question that most folks ask. And I tell you, a lot of people look at attack and they think, oh, well, this is for red teamers. No. The blue teamers are the ones who are really embracing this. I spent a lot of time in security operations centers teaching classes, and I've been to numerous of them where they send all their people to the con. They get the big flag with the whole thing on it, and they've got it on their wall, or they printed out the massive Excel spreadsheet and they're tagging things or color coding things. Like the blue teamers eat this up because it's the answer to a question. How do I detect all the things? Well, here's a place to maybe start.
Miss Berlin
start, not end, but start.
Totally agree.
She's
they have a sticks and taxi feed now too that you can pull in for different reasons, and that's one thing that we're planning on doing is pulling it in so we can tie in stuff and kind of map it out automatically.
And the vendors are embracing it too, right? Like a lot of the vendors are now building this into their tools where it tags based upon these things. A lot of them have pretty dashboards that say you have signatures that cover, 89% of the persistence category. What does that mean? Probably a bunch of nonsense, but at least they're thinking about it.
Yeah, you can get MITRE ATT&CK certified or whatever. And they're, the big 5 or 6 already have gone through it, and you can see which it's actually been pretty cool, especially for me as I'm building all of this stuff. I went in and saw what was I working on the other day? I can't remember, but it was one specific type of attack section that CrowdStrike, they're like, oh yeah, we can detect on this, and it will actually tell you, oh, it was creating using MMC to start up the local user manager and create a user, and it's like, oh, that we need to detect on that, and this is why, and this is what the specific attack was, and check mark, they got it. Right. So I think it's really cool that you can actually look at the results of what they were able to detect and not, and what the process was that they had to go through to actually get it.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. So we're getting down here to the bottom, and you're saying what makes a good model, and you say it's simple, it's useful, and it's imperfect. And even in the show notes, I was like, what? imperfect. What's the, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm hoping you mean inflexible by, or imperfect by that it's flexible and is able to bend and change. Am I wrong in that thought?
A little. Let me. I want to play a game.
Oh
with
boy,
you.
Very wrong.
I want to play a game,
What's
and
my
what I
word?
want to do here is I'm going to give you a sequence of numbers, and the goal is going to be for you to guess the next numbers in the sequence.
I hate those games.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you. It's not going to be too complex.
Ooh, I'm good at this. I'm good at this.
And so, all right, so here it is: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Give me the next three numbers.
12, 14, 16, 18, 20.
Oh man, you gave me extra numbers. Okay. What is the rule or the model that I use? What is the rule for the next numbers? Like, what rule am I using to pick one number after the next?
You're adding
Plus
2.
2.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Third.
Plus
The
3
rule-
minus 1.
The rule is picking any arbitrary number that is any arbitrary number after that is not the same as the number I've already picked. That's really stupid, right?
Technically, I mean, it's technically correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So
There's-
so the thing is, the only way you would know that is if you purposely tried to give me a number that did not fit the rule. So I went 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You went 12, 14, 16, 18. What if you would have just said 11 just to test it? Well, then you would have known, okay, well, that worked. What about -2? Well, that worked. So you have to test for the limits of what you're working on. You can't just, we have this whole notion of confirmation bias. Like, we like to confirm things, but we have to be able to falsify things too. That's important for models because there is no grand unified model of pretty much anything, right? Like, we just don't really have a lot of those. So we have to know where the limits or bounds of our models exist, or otherwise you have folks dumping their whole detection stack in favor of a MITRE thing.
You
So
broke
Chris,
my.
is the attack framework, is that a simple model?
I think so.
What makes it simple? Or
I think
what
it's-
doesn't make it complex?
I
Either
think it's simple because it is, and for a few reasons, it defines a few discrete categories. There are not too many of them. Like, there are several. I think there's like 11. It defines a few discrete categories. It is very easily represented, both conceptually and even visually. And there are a lot of entries within the categories, but that doesn't really matter. The categories are what matter. I think that's where the simplicity lies in that case.
You broke my brain with the non, I like me some patterns, and you screwed the pooch. So good night, everybody. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, in all fairness, that was a trap. So you were helpless in that one.
Oh.
Well, he's got post-traumatic stress now.
You broke my brain. You're like, nope, that's not it. And I'm like, what? I was just like, I love me some patterns, and you screwed my pattern here. So, okay, so it's imperfect. Okay, I can dig that. So useful. So what happens if it's not useful? I mean, we talked earlier about companies throwing away their models. Apparently they didn't find them that useful, or and they're trying to pick up another model that may or may not be useful. So how do you know if a model is useful? Is there some kind of guidelines that you should look at when you're doing that?
A good model should be the answer to a question you're already asking in most cases.
Rhetorical then.
If a model is answering a question you're not asking, I'm not going to say it's always bad. Maybe you're just not asking the right questions. But most models seek to answer a question. MITRE ATT&CK is answering the question, what are the things I need to detect?
Right.
That may sound like a simple explanation, but I think it really is, for the most part, that simple. It has to be something people will get meaning out of. That doesn't mean it's like a framework, like a tangible set of steps. It may mean it's a concept. Defense in depth is a concept that's useful because it helps us understand and explain, oftentimes to non-tech people, why I have to have both protection and detection controls, why I have to have those layers. So sometimes the usefulness is in practice. Sometimes it's in theory or an explanation or in relating to others. Earlier, one of the mental models I mentioned was the 10-point pain scale with the frowny face and the smiley face. Stupid simple, but it's something that allows patients who are operating on one level to talk and communicate their pain to doctors who are operating on another level. It sets a relative scale. They can track when things go up or down. It's a communication-centric model. So it has to be useful, or else it's never going to be heard of. People will never talk about it, and you just wouldn't know it exists.
Mm-hmm. So you asked you mentioned the right question, asking the right questions. What defines a model is, it answers some of the questions you're answering. You mentioned in your blog what defines a sandwich, and when I was reading that, the first thing I thought of was the theory of forms, like Plato. It's like, what is the penultimate definition of a chair, for instance, or in this case, you're like, what defines a sandwich? How do we define a sandwich? And I actually saw a tweet on that this weekend. What was it? Is it a calzone sandwich? I think that was what it was. I think that's why maybe you brought it up. But somebody had asked the question about, or is a hot dog a sandwich? That's maybe why you put the icon in there.
It is.
I just like the fact that you think of like Plato. You said Plato.
Plato, yes.
Right, first.
Right.
Yeah. Then I thought of calzones first. So
right.
I don't know
right.
what that says about the two of us.
Well, I kind of played a little bit with this one, because what I did before I released the blog post, I put a poll out on Twitter, and I just said, "Is a hot dog a sandwich? Yes or no?"
Yes, that's what it was.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
And my goal was not to blow up everyone's Twitter for the day, although that certainly happened for me, and my mentions were like a nightmare. And they still are. Like, people are still chiming in on it. But I did that, and then a couple days later, I went in on why. And the thing here is a hot dog sandwich is not an important question as it pertains to models. But the discussion is, right? The result of that doesn't really matter for practical purposes, but the discussion is, because the very first thing when you get into an intense discussion about whether a hot dog is a sandwich is eventually you ask the right question, which is, what defines a sandwich? That is the question that models come from. And a lot of people had a lot of opinions. There's a number of ways to look at it. One of the ones I mentioned is something called the cube rule. And the cube rule is basically a system wherein you visualize a cube, and wherever the carb is, the primary carb, the structure of it, that defines what it is. So, for instance, a sandwich is something where there's a carb on top and a carb on the bottom. Toast is something where there's just carb on bottom. A taco is something where there's a carb on three sides, kind of like a U. So in this case, by that standard, a hot dog is a taco. And that's basically the way the model defines it. If something is fully encased in carbs, that is then a calzone to tie in.
Okay, so a burrito then is a calzone.
If it's closed on all four sides, yes,
right.
it would then be a calzone. So a slice of pie in that sense is also a taco turned on its side, potentially. Other forms of calzones, a corn dog is a calzone. It's fully encased in carbs. So
hot pocket.
There's a lot of ways to go.
A
Pop-Tart is kind of a calzone, a dumpling. So
all of the things I want to eat, all calzones.
Which all these things like that sounds ridiculous, but it's a model, right? And it's a model that works pretty well actually at explaining these things. There are other models, and it's okay. There can be competing models that work in various different situations, but that's the whole goal. The whole goal is having the right conversation, which comes for the right question. Not everybody's going to be in the business of creating models. Not everyone is capable of having these kind of abstract conversations, or they get joy out of it. But there are people who do, and that's going to be critical for continued education in the field. So
here's a question. We all know what a sandwich is, or we assume we know what a sandwich is. According to this, each of us have specific ideas and suggestions and thoughts about what a sandwich is. What if you have no concept of a sandwich? Let's say you're coming from SETI Alpha 5 and you've come to Earth, and some guy's like, "Hey, I'm going to have a sandwich," and you're like, "What's a sandwich?"
Well, it would be really useful to have a model to explain to him what it was.
Right, but you're getting the answer of what a sandwich is from, some guy in Brooklyn versus some guy in Seattle here or in San Francisco. You may get three different answers. So this guy's like, okay, I understand that it's, between this, bread-like or this dough-like option, but it's also, with multiple meats, and it, no, it doesn't have any meats on this. It has these bean sprouts or God knows what.
It's almost like when someone is new to InfoSec and they ask what threat hunting is.
Well, I don't think anybody knows that.
Because you're going to get like 5 different answers from 5 different people, because that's something there's not a super clear definition on. I think the thing you would hope, whether it be sandwiches or threat hunting, is that eventually where it matters, and it doesn't really matter with sandwiches so much as it does maybe threat hunting, that the industry would eventually converge on things. And that's what we kind of have to work towards. Now, we will never fully get there. I think a lot of folks think, we have this thing in our field where we have all these terms and no one agrees on what they are. That's not unique to us. So like in the field of psychology, the term intelligence, we would think everyone in psychology would have a clear definition of what intelligence is. They don't. It means a lot of different things. Now, the thing with psychology, because they're really big on like well-documented sources and citing the provenance of knowledge and things like that, when you're writing a paper about intelligence, the first thing you do is say, this is how I define intelligence. Because at that point, it doesn't matter whether people agree with you or not. At that point, they have a baseline to work from, and everything else they read in that paper, they can work from your baseline. And if their definition varies to some degree, well, then they have the intellectual capacity to modify or apply to their own definition. That's the thing we need too. It's okay if we have a few different definitions of threat hunting, but the folks who are writing about it have to define it. I have a threat hunting class. I think we're going to talk about it a little later. Like slide 2 is, this is how I define threat hunting. And if you don't agree with it, well, that's fine. But for our purposes, this is what we're working from. Work from this frame of mind. And if your definition is a little different, well, you can apply that via your own cognition.
Yeah, that's... Go ahead, Ms. Berlin.
It's the same thing with red teaming and pen testing and security engineering and security architects. That's a question I get a lot from people that want to like break into InfoSec or looking for a new job. They're like, well, what does a security engineer do? I'm like, well, I mean, I've done it a couple times and I've done something different every time. So good luck. I don't know. Depends on how HR wrote the description.
Yep. Yeah, and with definitions, if you read white papers, sometimes they will supply you with the definitions of those if you are new to the field or what have you, because it helps for clarification purposes. If you go and Google a word, it may mean something in a different context depending on the industry or the organization or the people using it. So that makes complete sense. So
yeah, and this is something like I put this on the people like listening here, right? Like if you're a person who's into blogging, and like blogs aren't like the best thing in terms of like source knowledge, but like that's what we have to work with. So the little thing you can do right now is if you're going to write a paper on red teaming or on threat hunting, like at the beginning of it or in a reference, put your working definition of threat hunting or red teaming, so when the folks are reading it, they can work from that. So that way, if they have a different one or if they read another one later on, they know what the difference is. They know where where things may not line up.
You got a lot of good links here. I've never heard of Diamond Model of Intrusion Analysis. That's an interesting looking white paper. My friend Ian Coldwater was looking for some white papers to read. She's feeling a little ill right now. Anyway, or she was. That was a couple weeks ago. All right, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check out some of the links on here. So, Ms. Berlin, Mr. Boettcher, any other questions? Because there's just so much we could talk about with this. It's just very interesting. I'm seeing philosophy. I'm seeing, management type, questions and thought process behind a lot of this stuff. I mean, it could branch off into any number of places.
Do you see anyone attempting? Gosh, I don't know how I want to answer this question. To implement some kind of mental model into like the bigger picture, other than these frameworks that we talked about.
What do you mean by like bigger picture?
Like how? I mean, like what you're talking about, like what you're not sure that you'll see in your lifetime, right? Is better definitions and just like the medical field did, where they came together and kind of just had this big period of introspection. Like, do you see anybody like even trying to successfully?
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think so, but it's not like a centralized thing. Like we don't have a governing body. We don't have a centralized source that does this. It's a distributed thing wherein it happens almost kind of grassroots. So like my investigation theory process, the investigation process, I wrote about that, and then I began teaching it. I taught it to a lot of people, and now a lot of people use it. A lot of professors have now included that in their college material, and it matriculates out, right? So if a model is simple, useful, and falsifiable, and people can kind of get it, it's represented and teachable in a reasonable way. Ideally, the thing that happens is it matriculates out, and it gets into all these various forms of education. And if it gets into the education, whether it's professional education or college education, it eventually becomes kind of like de facto accepted thing, right? That's what happened with defense in depth. Someone came up with that model to explain things we were already doing or a justification for those things. And they started teaching it. Students picked it up. They used it in their careers. Everybody else started teaching it, and it kind of built up from there. So I think, ideally, I guess it would be done in a more centralized manner, right? Like medicine has that because they have like certifying bodies. We don't. I don't know of anybody who's like taking that on right now or who could feasibly do that. I don't even know if that's the answer for us. But at the grassroots level, yeah, certainly people are trying to do these things.
Do you think we could just turn them into RFCs?
It's not a horrible idea. RFCs work really good. Amongst when we talk about source knowledge, my background in terms of investigations is mostly on the network side. And what I love about the network side is I can go look at RFCs and I understand how protocols should work. They don't always follow that, but I know. On the host side, we don't got nothing like that, right? I mentioned the shim cache thing. What if there was an RFC for the application compatibility cache? That'd be pretty baller. We don't have it. So that something that takes a form like that is helpful. Even just like more academically written papers. I'm not saying like they don't have to be boring to be academic, but things that very simply, and this is going to sound elitist, but like cite your damn sources, right? Like that's it. Like if you're going to make a claim that's in fact and not opinion, cite the source. That's all. That's all I want. Because if you cite your sources, then I can cite you as a source, and then someone can cite me as a source, and we build this real long chain of things. Like if I want to study something in psychology right now, I can read a paper published now, and I can check its sources and its sources and its sources, and before long, I'm reading something written in the 1920s about behaviorism and operant conditioning. I can trace this whole provenance of knowledge back. And it's all provable, and it's just a magical, beautiful thing. We don't have that right now, and it drives me nuts.
Well, for a lot of things in the security field, it's whichever startup is first to market to be able to name things like APTs, or cozy lizard, or a happy panda, or whatever it is, or APT 4792 or whatever. The first person to discover it gets to name it in this case, in science, Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Mr. Boettcher, do you have any other questions before we move along to another topic?
Well, we talked about before the podcast some behavioral psychology. How would understanding or reading more about behavioral psychology help us in InfoSec and these mental models as well?
That's a great question. At the center of all this are humans. Computers are fairly easy to understand. If you get the right people in the room, there's nothing a computer will do that you cannot explain. Right? It's as simple as that. Now, you may have trouble getting the right people in the room, but you can explain anything a computer can do. Humans, not so much. And so much of what we do on the part of this that really matters is human-centric. Every investigation involves a human at some point. The human is at the center of that. I don't believe that's going to change in our lifetimes. I know folks think machines are going to do this. I think machines will help humans, but not replace them in that regard. So you have to learn how humans think and how they operate, both for the practical application of the job, but also for your own learning. You have to, we use this term metacognition, thinking about thinking. Folks who are more metacognitively aware are better at their jobs because they understand how they learn, they understand how to apply what they learn. So that is rooted in behavioral psychology and understanding of those things. I don't think that's something, not everybody gets their kicks reading about that stuff, but I think it's something everyone should have at least a basic understanding of in the right ways. I think a lot of people will like read a book on social engineering or like watch a conference talk and think they know about behavioral psychology. That is such a small portion, a small fraction of it. And it's really not super related in a lot of ways. Like it's more about your own thought process. It's more about how you learn and how you interact with people. The notion of, most people think we learn independently. There's this whole world of social learning theory where the people we surround ourselves dictate to some degree what we know and what we don't know. There are all these great things floating around out there that are proven scientific concepts, things we feel really good about, mental models that came out of psychology that really help define an understanding of what we know. And I consider myself an educator, and so I really focus on these things because they help me create new knowledge to some degree. But there's the application of the knowledge is something you can gain a better grasp over if you have a good understanding of that behavioral psychology.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Any last questions? Because it's interesting how, in a collaborative process, people's experiences will color the models that they will create or will try to create. So yeah, that makes complete sense. So. All right. Well, I think we can move along. So some of the other things, other than being superhuman, smart guy, and screwing around with my rhythm and my patterns and stuff earlier, you also do something called the Rural Technology Fund. We talked a little bit about it in the previous episode, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about why that started and what you're doing with it.
Sure, and I'm glad you asked about this. This is my favorite thing to talk about because it's really where a lot of my passion lies. It's I came from a very rural area in West Kentucky, so as far west in Kentucky as you can go. It's actually surrounded on 3 sides by water, so it's not very easy to get to. You have to really want to get there. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for kids like me who were interested in computers at that age, and that really hasn't changed a lot. It's changed some, like internet access is a lot more ubiquitous now than it used to be. Schools have a little bit easier time getting computers, but that's only a part of the battle, right? We need to show more kids the opportunities that tech jobs represent. And it's hard for kids to know about that. There's this whole notion of navigational capital. If your grandparents were coal miners and your parents were coal miners, well, maybe all you know is coal mining, right? They don't know the opportunities that tech jobs present, the salaries that exist that can help end that generational poverty of their family. So that's something that's always been on my mind. The tech job, I grew up in poverty, pretty extreme poverty. The house I grew up in sold at auction like a few years ago for $14,000, right? Wow. The real estate market's bad in West Kentucky, but it ain't that bad. We grew up in poverty. A lot of people had it a lot worse, but we didn't have it great either. The tech job changed my life. It ended generational poverty, right? Like my great-grandparents to my parents all lived in poverty. I don't, and my kid, God willing, won't either at this point. So the tech job was really the thing that did that. So what we would try to do is introduce more kids to tech jobs just by exposing them to the technology. So we do that in a couple ways. I founded the Rural Technology Fund about 11 years ago. As a scholarship fund, we just simply offered scholarships to kids from rural areas who are pursuing computer technology of any sort, not just security, but computer administration, computer engineering, design, and so on. About halfway through, so about 6 years ago to now, we also started investing in teachers. So helping give teachers the things they need to expose kids to technology of various sorts. So we partner with teachers. We go into these rural classrooms, give them things like 3D printers, Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, robotics kits, nice. All these little things. And this is all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. At the younger levels, they're kind of things that the kids think are toys, but they're actually teaching them sequence and logic and all that. At the older levels, it's more advanced, like robotics, engineering, coding, and so on. And we just give those things to the teachers and give them the curriculum they need to be successful. And just try to get more kids exposed to the technology. And if they're already interested in it, they've already got that spark where we can kind of fan the fire and help them get the skills they need to be more prepared when they go to college or enter the job market, because they're kind of at a disadvantage. The fact of the matter is that if you live in a rural area, you're more likely to live in poverty, more likely to die earlier, you're more likely to be in poor health, be disabled, all those bad things for a number of reasons. So we try to do all that. Very proud of the work we've done this far. As of today, we've put technology into the hands of about 80,000 kids in 45 states. And that's all operating on pretty small budget. We don't pay salaries, all volunteers. And we also don't have overhead. My for-profit business pays all the overhead. So, any contributions we bring in, any fundraising we do goes directly to the classroom. So it's been an awesome ride. It's been an awesome thing to be part of. Like I said, 80,000 kids so far, and our goal is to hit 100,000 by the end of the year.
That's fantastic. How would if people were interested in helping out with that? Do you take volunteers or anything like that?
So the volunteering thing is a little bit tricky. One of the things to do is to watch our social media channels, particularly our Facebook and our Twitter. A lot of the times teachers will come to us and they'll say, I'm in, a random city in Indiana, and I would love for someone to come out for a career day. And so we'll post, and usually we can find folks who are willing to drive an hour or two and get out there and do those sort of things. So those kind of opportunities present themselves. We're not really set up super well for active volunteering in classrooms, because mostly we just try to enable the teachers, right? We make sure they have the things they need, because this whole notion of send a guy like me out to a classroom and work with them for an hour 2 or 3 times a year, it helps. but it doesn't really help in the way we want it to help in like a long sustaining way. The teacher has to be there. It has to be an active part of the curriculum, something they're doing all the time. And we work with the teachers to make sure that happens. So we work with them to make sure this isn't just for an after school activity. We really we don't fund projects if they're just going to go to the gifted and talented kids, because that's a bunch of garbage, right? Like we want everyone to have access to this stuff. So we really focused on equity of access to everyone. And so volunteering doesn't necessarily, it's hard to figure that in. That said, one of the things we're really good at is what I call turning dollars into opportunities. Mm-hmm. The list of classrooms I have that are, waiting for donations or waiting for equipment is infinitely long. And our ability to do good work in the world is simply limited by our funding. So there's donation opportunities. That's all on our website at ruraltechfund.org.
And how do y'all, get teachers? Is it a word of mouth thing? Like one teacher tells another teacher? Is there some kind of teacher Facebook where it's like, hey, these guys helped out? How do you get your message out there?
So teachers are probably the most resourceful people in the world, and they'll do a lot of things to provide for the student. Teachers who really care will do everything in their power to provide for their students. So we're pretty easy to find with the right kind of Google searches, and a lot of teachers have found us and they tell their friends. So a good portion of our grants that we give to classrooms come from teachers who literally just find us, and we have a form on our website to fill out. And then I talk with them. I personally work with every teacher in every case. And, we don't make them jump through a lot of hoops. They fill out a very simple application. If we have questions, I get on the phone or exchange some emails with them. And then oftentimes we cut them a check and send them the links and get them hooked up with all the things they need. We also work a lot with Donors Choose. If you're not familiar with Donors Choose, it's a charity website. Basically, teachers can go and list projects they want to do, and they're public. And anybody can go into Donors Choose and sort by country or project type or geography, whatever else, and pick a project to fund. So we work with them. We actually got them to add a rural checkbox so we can focus in on the areas we're concerned about. And you can go in and click that box and type STEM or Raspberry Pi and find those things. So we have a bunch of searches and keywords that pop up that we use to seek out teachers ourselves. So it's a mixture of them finding us and us also finding them.
Cool. So I don't have a lot of money, and I'd like to help out. Does it take a lot of money to help a classroom?
Not really. So we really work hard, tremendously hard, to make sure the dollars go as far as possible. So anytime we do projects, we often try to find matching funds. So we do a lot of stuff like with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or 3M. They have a big charitable giving program where they do a lot of matching to try to double or triple our money when we can. And we also really work with teachers to make sure, again, that the if we send them a 3D printer, that it's not just going to sit in a class with 20 kids and they're the only ones who are going to have access to them. So we'll go and say, well, what does your library look like? Because for us, I think the library is the new makerspace. Libraries are trying to redefine what they are, right, and makerspace type activities fit in really good. So if we buy that 3D printer and we put it in the library, well, now it's not just 20 kids who have access, it's 250.
Right.
So the math for us generally looks like we can expose a kid to technology for about $3 is what it generally works out to. Some are higher, some are lower, but on average it's about $3. So, if you don't like $3, that's another kid pretty much. And we're really proud of the work we put in to achieve that. That's phenomenal.
That is phenomenal. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Very cool. So, so yeah, if you're interested in helping out, maybe you were in a rural area. I was telling Mr. Sanders here before we started, I lived in a small town of about 1,000 people. My doctor was not also the veterinarian and the ice cream maker, but it was a very small town. It had one street, no stoplights. They only got a stoplight because Death Row got moved from Potosi in Missouri down to Licking, and tripled the size of the town because they could count prisoners as part of the city population for tax purposes. They're always trying to get that fat bank. So, but yeah, I lived there until I was 12 years old, and the first computer I played with was only because I was in what was called the gifted program. I was doing accelerated courses at the time, and that allowed me to get onto a computer with a CGA monitor of all things. Of course, this was 1990 or so. So that's being what it is. Yeah, it's great to find out, because there's a lot of places in Missouri, especially like South Central Missouri, that are, typical, poverty line. Everybody's making, $30,000-$40,000 a year, blue collar workers. No, the Microsofts and the Googles and the Ciscos and the big companies of the world are not looking at these areas to help build up technology and build technology centers there, like they are with the Western Washingtons and the Californias. So
absolutely,
I love what you're doing with that. That's very much needed in this world. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Right on. So, let me see some else that we're doing. I'm sorry. Did anybody have any questions, Mr. Boettcher, Miss Berlin?
You asked the one I wanted to ask. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, and one more thing before we leave that behind too, I just want to say the other thing you can do is, if you happen to know a teacher, maybe it's your kid's school, or you have a relative who teaches, send them to the website as well. There's a link, you can click on it. It's like ruraltechfund.org/fundmyproject, and there's a list, and it describes, here are the types of projects we fund, with a link to the application. So it's not just about helping us fund the teachers, but if you happen to know those teachers and they could benefit from this, send them our way too.
Cool. Yeah, I've done the donors website, where somebody was like, yeah, I need tables, or I need 5 Chromebooks or something, and you throw $50-$100 on there, and it's like, holy crap, I've got my got Chromebooks for my kids in my classroom, so we can do things now, or whatever. It's just amazing to see the emails coming back from them saying, this is what we're doing, this is how we're helping. So
it's a sad thing that that's the state of the country at this point, that like teachers have to ask for tables and chairs. Mm-hmm. I can't fix that. But what I can do is I can't fix that on a global scale, right, but I can buy the chairs or buy the laptops or whatever for some teachers here and there and put a dent in it. And I think we can collectively do that. And it's an amazing thing, and especially with the donors choose stuff too, because you've been experienced with that. The teachers, we do this with our other projects as well. The teachers send you thank you letters from the
mm-hmm.
students,
mm-hmm.
And they send you pictures. And I don't know if you can see right over my left shoulder here, there's a table back here with a big stack of papers on it. Those are all thank you letters from students and teachers. That stack is about 2 feet high, and it's a series of 4. So there's like 8 feet of thank you letters. Like, nice. It's great. We measure our thank you letters in feet at this point. So that's amazing. It is. And this is definitely not a thankless job. Like, we get a lot of thanks, and that's super awesome. But it's really great to hear the stories of the students, the things they're learning about, and it's kind of a long lead time, but it's changing some lives for some people. And I'm invested in this because I know it changed my life, right? That's the tech job, and finding an interest in computers and having a few people that cared about me and pointed me in the right direction changed my life. And it's why I'm here. And if I can do that for some other folks, then I think that's living right.
Right on. Excellent. All right. So, to help pay the bills, like you'd mentioned, that this is all done, overhead is all paid for through your classes. One of the other things while we were prepping for this was I knew that you had tweeted out that your practical threat hunting class was going on, or reopening in this case. I didn't quite understand what it meant by reopening. What the format is for that. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the practical threat hunting class and what you do in there.
Yeah, so practical threat hunting is my newest class. So I run a company called Applied Network Defense at it's networkdefense.co, and we're primarily an online training company. Not every class hosted there is mine. We host some classes for others, help other people build classes as well. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in building a class, that's certainly something we can help you with and host it. But also it's an outlet for my classes that I teach. Practical threat hunting is the newest one. We launched it in January, kind of the first offering. It is online, it is on demand, but for the first offering of any of my classes, it's only open for a limited amount of time so that I can get kind of one cohort in there to go through it. Everyone's in the same place, collect feedback, tweak, and things like that of that nature. So that's what happened with that course. It was open earlier in the year, and it closed not too long after that, and it just reopened again last week. So that's, the whole thing with threat hunting, it's something I've been involved with a lot. It's very nebulous. There's also a lot of kind of vendor nonsense that gets thrown in there about automated threat hunting solutions and what is and what isn't threat hunting. I clarify what I think it is at the very first slide, like I told you. So it's really, if you've never done threat hunting before, maybe you've done some other investigative work, it's going to give you the things you need. Again, I focus on mental models in my teaching as well. So it's going to give you structured, organized ways to think about that, get better at threat hunting. And even if you've done a lot of threat hunting before, I think it's going to help you better structure and organize your thoughts and processes. We really focus on two types of hunting, what I call attack-based hunting, and then the other one is called data-based hunting. Two different approaches and a lot of labs and exercise. I give you a bunch of data that we've created where you can go through and hunt for the things. We give you a lot of like junk data with it. So like you have real noise that you have to filter through, which is hard to simulate in a lab. We've done that for this course and overall really proud of it. So that is my full-time job. That's what puts dinner on the table, but it's also the thing that funds a lot of the Rural Tech Fund, particularly, again, all of our overhead, and then some. It contributes to that. So with every course that's purchased, some percentage is generally going to the Rural Tech Fund.
That's awesome. Yeah, and donating the Rural Tech Fund, it is a nonprofit charity, so you do get tax deductions if that's what motivates you to give. So if you want to give a little cash, then feel free to do so. One last thing, we mentioned the author bit, Practical Pack Analysis, been out for a while, No Starch Press book. We have actually ran it in our book club. Unfortunately, I don't know if we had you on to interview for that. A long time. It's back. I think it was one of the first or second books we ever did.
I did go to one of the meetings for the book club and did a Q&A for that.
Cool. All right. Yeah. It's a very good book. If you're interested, you can go to No Starch Press and get that book. I would suggest not getting it through the Humble Bundle if it ever is out like that, because it gets lost in the shuffle, and you don't really need all those other books necessarily when you're needing just one book. So there's a link in the show notes to the Practical Packet Analysis book on No Starch's website. If you buy it with the print book, you also get the PDF version, which is great at No Starch, and the PDFs are DRM free, which is something that I enjoy, knowing that I'm not having to unlock it with Adobe Acrobat or something like that, some ungodly program. So there's links in the show notes to the book for that. Any books or anything else you're thinking about, working with or writing any other books in the future?
I'm working on the next one right now. It's about 2/3 of the way done. I've talked about this publicly before, so it's not so much breaking news, but my next book is going to be focused on intrusion detection honeypots. So specifically the use of honeypots for network security monitoring and detection. I don't have really an ETA. I'd like to think I'm going to have it done by the end of this year. Best laid plans and all that. It's about 2/3 of the way done. So more to come on that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, man, this was a supersized episode. If it goes any longer, we're probably going to have to split it up into thirds, which is something we've never done before. But you've got a lot going on, Chris. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about where people would find you if they wanted to discuss the Rural Technology Fund, Practical Pack Analysis, threat hunting, mental models in particular.
Yeah, so the blog is kind of the centralized repo for everything, chrissanders.org. There's a link there that has my email address. I'm on Twitter at chrissanders88. I'm fairly active on that. Those are probably the best places to get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Easy to find.
Okay. Excellent. So, Ms. Berlin, Circle City Con just finished up. You were just a spectator there, but you're going to be at Layer 8 Con the weekend of... actually, we probably shouldn't talk about this because this is going to come out way after that. But
but June 8th, I'll be there.
June 8th, you'll be there, yeah.
June 8th. And then after that, I will be at Show Me Con speaking. And then after that, I will be giving some training at B-Sides Cleveland, but that is sold out.
Oh, wow. Did B-Sides Cleveland sell out because all InfoSec people not in Seattle are in Ohio?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It just seems like everybody I know who's in InfoSec is in Ohio. I don't know if that's because the only people I've met have been at DerbyCon, which is kind of, geographically close to Ohio. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if people wanted to talk about hackers' health or, your other initiatives, or if you're coming out with another version of the Defensive Security Handbook or anything from O'Reilly, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss any of that?
Well, first you have to yell at Lee because he's the one that doesn't have the time.
Oh, he's the holdout, is he? Hold out.
I'm just going to blame him because I don't know that he listens. So.
Oh, yeah. No, he doesn't.
No, but you can for anything mental health hackers related, it's at Hackers Health, and that at InfoSystir for me, INFOSYSTIR.
Okay. Hey, tell us a little bit about the Slack.
Oh, you can join our Slack, which is now what is it up to? Holy cow. Over 1,800 people, which is insane, by DMing us on our Brakesec Twitter. Or I always say this part, you can email bds.podcast@gmail.com.
Yep. And for the person who wanted an invite the other day, yes, it's in the show notes. DM the Twitter or send an email to bds.podcast. So I double checked that. I'm not crazy. Thank you for trying to gaslight me. I appreciate that. You failed. No, I'm just kidding. I love you, man. Thank you for reaching out. Yeah. So, Mr. Boettcher, you've got a lot going on yourself. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what LogMD is, and if you're planning on being anywhere in the near future for conference-wise?
Well, the only conference I have on the schedule is DerbyCon. You can get a hold of me at my Twitter account at BoettcherPwned, my last name, PWNED. And I'm the developer of LogMD. It helps you log the right things in a Windows environment. So check it out. It's free at log-md.com.
So it helps you threat hunt all the things, or will help you with threat hunting?
It can help you with threat hunting, yes. Especially we got features that help you detect PowerShell things and WMI and stuff like that. So you can push LogMD out to a box, run it, and see if there's any suspicious PowerShell going on. Okay, very cool. Yep. All right. So, man, I got a lot of stuff going on. InfoSec Campout's happening 23rd through the 24th of August. We do have tickets available. We do have campsites available if you want to come and hang out at a nice local, chill, Pacific Northwest-based conference. Please come and do that. Just got our first sponsor last week, Ms. Height from Leviathan. Full disclosure, that's who I work for. Have saw their way fit to give us some money, so we appreciate that. They're our first official sponsor, which is always good because it's like, oh wow, we're not going to be broke. And I know Miss Berlin knows about, getting sponsors and stuff. So, the first one, when they were like, oh, yes, we're going to give you some money, I was like, oh, I'm not going to be poor now. Right. We might actually break even. But yeah, we've got most of our speaker slots filled up. It'll probably be full by the time this actually goes to air, part 2 or part 3. We are still looking for speakers or workshops. If you're looking for those, we're trying to get ham radio licenses workshop done. So if you've never been a ham or want to be a ham operator, we're working on that. If you're interested and you have an advanced license, we have 2 people and a proctor, I think, available. We need 3 advanced licensees to run the proctoring for the exam. So if you're interested, please hit up at InfoSec Campout, all one word. There's plenty of tickets available for the conference itself. You can go to www.infoseccampout.com. We try to keep it simple here. InfoSec Campout. Nobody should try to figure out what the conference is all about. It's InfoSec and it's camping. So there you go. Podcast. If you want to follow Brakesec Podcast, we're on Twitter at Brakesec, BRAKESEC. And you can follow me on Twitter, Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And, that's, we're on iTunes. Thank you to our patrons. The patrons are actually another sponsor of the podcast. We are user supplied. So Brakesec is actually sponsoring the conference as well. Full disclosure, I'm the president of the nonprofit that is running the conference. But we might be making some donations charitably with regard to that from the Patreon donors. So we appreciate everybody who gives money to our Patreon or our PayPal if you get value from this podcast. So we appreciate it a lot. You can get t-shirts at our TPub site. Somebody tweeted something out today that was very clever, and I think I might actually make that a Ravici, I think his name, on Twitter. But he was like, you should take a break, Sec. And I was like, oh, that's so clever.
Yes, I know.
That's nice.
It blew my mind.
I get to see him this next weekend too.
Oh, kick ass. Yes. Please give him max hugs for me if you see him, and tell him that, yes, that's going to be a thing on our t-shirts. So, and iTunes. I just found out that iTunes is changing the way they're doing podcasts so that reviews are actually how we get better visibility to like the what's hot or not or swipe lefts or whatever. So the more views we get on iTunes, the more visibility we get. So if you use iTunes to listen to the podcast, please leave a review, because that is worth its weight in gold. If you can't give money to to our tip jar or whatever, and you're like, I don't know how to help, do that. Put a review in. Hey, they don't suck. We like Miss Berlin. We like Mr. Boettcher. They're awesome. And Mr. Brian, because whatever. So, So we'd appreciate any additional feedback you can give these to help us out. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. I hope everyone has a great week. Be nice to one another, especially on Twitter. Take care of yourselves. Don't feel like you need to do too much. Take a mental health day if you need to, because you got to take care of yourself. You're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye bye.
Yeah.